Good? All right. We're recording this because in case there's kids that are absent, we'll put it on Schoology, they can watch it. So the first jar here, so you're looking at number 1 on your paper. The first jar is dryer lint, okay? This box was put together actually by Mrs. Halpin. She's a retired teacher from Smoketown. Sometimes she'll come in as a substitute. She was actually subbing for Mr. Miller yesterday. But she wrote up information about each of these jars. So I'm gonna read the information. So she says, dryer lint is a tough one to call. This mixture includes hair and fibers from clothing. Although the matter can't really be returned to the clothes and towels it came from, they have not become new matter. There's a hint there. Is dryer lint a physical change or chemical change? You're circling. We're gonna check it at the end. Okay, number 2. I have roasted ground coffee beans, okay? They were picked and roasted, which is that's the change we're talking about. We're not talking about the change that ground them up. We're talking about the change when they were roasted, okay? So what do you think that is? Physical change or chemical change? Number 3, when we get a color change, that usually is a physical change. Sometimes it can be a chemical change. Okay, so you have to decide if this is going to be a physical change or a chemical change. In here is a handkerchief. It's a piece of a handkerchief. This handkerchief was red when it started. But if you look on the other side, it's no longer red because it was dunked in bleach, which is a strong chemical. We're talking about the change that happened to the ink that caused it to no longer be red. Was that a physical change or a chemical change? Some of these might seem a little gross. This was made a long time ago, so this kit was. In 1983, banana walnut muffin mix was put in this jar. It's not baked. It was not baked, so it was not cooked. So we're talking about just the dry ingredients mixed together. Number 5. I'm gonna read what she said. Okay, again, Mrs. Halpin wrote this, so this is her talking. These ashes came from my dad's last cigarette. I tortured him about smoking in ways you cannot imagine, but it worked. Not only did I force a lifestyle and medical change, but the ashes represent what kind of change? When the cigarette burned to create those ashes, what kind of change was it? All right, some of these are gonna be gross, like I said. This next one was, at one time when it was put in here in 1983, a fresh piece of raisin bread that had been baked. So we're talking about the physical or chemical change that this went through to create what you see now. But the raisin bread, what you see now is not the way it looked in 1983. Mold and bacteria have gotten in there, so it's changed even more. Actually, I'm not gonna pass this one because you can't really see what it looked like, but picture a fresh piece of raisin bread put in the jar. The baking process created a physical change or a chemical change. Number 7, back in the day, there were not digital photos. One had to load film into the camera, take the pictures, and then take the film back out of the camera to be developed. You'd take it to a lab and put the film in chemicals. At the lab, they'd put the film in the chemicals, then they would take the film and place it in the machine that would burn the image onto photo paper, and then the paper was placed into a developer, a stabilizer, and then a fixer. Finally, after a few days, you'd go to pick up your photos. So did that film go through a physical change or a chemical change? All right, this next one is blue water. We have food coloring mixed with water. Has the water or food coloring changed into new matter? That's what you're asking yourself. I'll give you a hint. If we open up the lid and let it sit, the water would slowly evaporate and you'd be left with the blue coloring at the bottom. So that might help you decide if it's a physical change or a chemical change. Question. That number is 8. Number 9. Number 9. No, the blue food coloring is 8. So number 9. This is decaying leaves. Okay, rotting leaves. Are they undergoing a physical change or a chemical change? Decaying leaves. Okay, number 10. Here's another one I'm not going to pass around. Okay, but I will show you. So look up here, number 10. Does anyone know what this is? Anyone know what this is? Reagan. a spring. So watch, I'm changing the shape and I can let go. Is that a physical change or a chemical change? Number 10. Number 11. This jar has 3 toothpicks. I'm not talking about the 2 toothpicks that look brand new. I'm talking about the 3rd one at the bottom of the jar that has been burnt. Did that toothpick go through a physical change or a chemical change? Number 10. Okay, number 11 is the toothpick that's burnt. Okay, number 12. Does anyone know how you make mud? Lydia. So in 1983, Mrs. Halpin added water to dirt. She made mud. This is no longer mud. The water has evaporated. What change did this mud undergo? Here's a hint. Can we reverse it and turn it back into mud? Number 13. I'm not going to pass this one around, but Mrs. Halpin said when she bought her first house, in the kitchen was the first time she had lived somewhere that had a garbage disposal. And so she wasn't being very careful, and the dishcloth fell in the garbage disposal and got chewed up. Did this dishcloth undergo a physical or chemical change? Okay, number 14. Remember, some of these are a little gross. I won't pass this one around either. Okay, and this doesn't look anything like what it used to look like anymore. So this is, looking at it won't be helpful. That's why I'm not going to pass it around. But picture your mom or your dad or your older sister or brother boiling water to cook pasta. They put pasta noodles in. Before they put it in, they're dry and hard, right? They put them in and they take them out. In this jar, at one time, she had an uncooked noodle to show what it started as, and then a cooked noodle next to it. Is the cooking of the noodle, the boiling of the noodle, a physical change or a chemical change? That one's going to be a hard one. All right, number 15 is not in a jar. Number 15 is not in a jar. So she's got a nice piece of rope that came unbraided. Is this a physical change or a chemical change? Number 16. There's 2 different changes in this jar. The first one is not the one we're talking about. So it's got a candle in here. When we are working with a candle, the wax can get hot and melt and change shape and then harden. That's a physical change, okay? The other change is what you have to decide if it's a physical or chemical. When you burn the wick, is that a physical change or a chemical change? When you burn the wick of a candle. Remember, some of these are gross. How many of you have ever, your family's ever made Jell-O? You heat the water, you pour the mixture in, right? Have you ever made shapes, Jell-O shapes you can pick up? Okay, so they used to be called finger Jell-O, and then there's a time people called them Jell-O jigglers. Okay, so I'm gonna read what she said. I'm not gonna pass this around because it's been so long, it's undergone another change since then, but this used to be Jell-O. So this is what Mrs. Halpin said. This used to be something called finger Jell-O in the 70s. You call them Jell-O jigglers. We used to have finger Jell-O battles in my house, much to the dismay of my parents. I guess they had food fights. It was fun though. The ingredients were water, Jell-O powder, and the warm water would make the gelatin mix with the water. Weirdly, the cold water made the gelatin hard. This makes the Jell-O hard enough when it cools that you're able to cut it into shapes. When it was fresh, it was what kind of change? Okay, you're telling me what kind of change you think Jell-O is when you make Jell-O. All right, number 18. Has anybody seen really old paper? Have you handled it? What happens when you touch really old paper, Marshall? Okay, yeah. What, does it look the same as new paper? How does it look different? Braden? We call that fading. It's faded, yeah. So I'm going to read what she says about what she said about this paper that I just put in. It says, these order sheets are from 1960. They're from a bakery. Okay? You'll see on the paper red ink, but you'll see, if you look at the paper, it looks a little discolored because it's so old. It's from 1960. So has this paper undergone a physical or a chemical change? Do you have a number 19? Now, Mrs. Halpin is awesome. She's one of my favorite people, but she's not perfect. And you'll see why when I start reading this first sentence. She roots for the wrong football team. It says, in 1983, Penn State went to the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona. I had called early for tickets and landed first on the list. Unfortunately, they did not have a computer system, and the person who put me first on the list forgot. Therefore, I could not go to the game. I hosted a party. I cut up so many papers into confetti so that if Penn State won, we would throw them at the end of the game to celebrate. Is that confetti a physical change or a chemical change? Nora, I'm not going to give you a paper because we're almost done. You can just take it. Okay. All right, remember how we said some of these are gross? This next one, number 20, she only wrote one sentence and she didn't even finish the sentence. It trails off. I used to cut my brother-in-law's hair. Is that a physical change or a chemical change? All right, now for number 21. For number 21, is there anyone in here who's brave? All right, Donovan, come up. I'm gonna need you to take a little sip of this. No, just joking. I'm not gonna have you do it. Because if you took a drink of this, would probably be the last drink you took in your life. I was joking. You don't need to come up. Can anyone guess what this delicious looking substance is that was put in here in 1983? Braden. Good guess. That's not it. Lydia. Good guess. That's not it. Elijah. Good guess. That's not it. Nora. Good guess. That's not it. Erica. Henry. No. This actually, you might have had, some of you had it this morning, and it was an entirely different color when it went in here in 1983. It was white. This at one time was milk, and I'm not going to pass it around because you can see it looks like the milk came alive at one point and tried to climb out of the jar. I'm not passing this around. Did the milk undergo a physical or chemical change? Okay, when we sound ready, I can keep going. This next one, I'm not going to pass around either, but I'm just going to show you. You can see the ribbon, the factory cut end of the ribbon is nice and straight, right? But over time, we call it fraying when the threads start to pull apart from each other. Is that a physical change or a chemical change? And then last but not least, this last one I can't pass around because you need to be careful when you're touching rusty things. If you have a cut or if it scratches you and gets in your blood, it can make you sick. So I've got an iron nail. Fe stands for iron. But as it rusted, I now have iron oxide. Is that a physical change or a chemical change? All right, we're gonna go through it. You can fix your answers as we go if you'd like. Okay? I will call for you to raise your hand to vote. You're gonna raise your hand when I say if you think it's a physical change, or you'll raise your hand if you think it's a chemical change. You're voting for everyone, okay? If you're wrong, you fix it. We're gonna talk about why we're right or wrong, and then you'll have a better understanding. So starting with number 1, dryer lint that's made up of human hair, pet hair, skin cells, piece of clothing. Is this physical change or chemical change? If you thought physical change, raise your hand. Chemical change, raise your hand. It is physical change, okay? The matter is just mixed together, but it's the same matter, okay? Number 2, the roasted coffee grounds. Or ground coffee. Is this a physical change when we roasted them or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. Cutting them up is physical. Roasting it is chemical. Dipping the handkerchief in bleach. Is that a physical change or chemical change? Physical? Chemical. It is a chemical change. The chemical reaction between the bleach and the ink is why it is no longer red, even though a lot of times color change is a physical thing. The 1983 banana walnut muffin mix. When they mix those ingredients together, not bake them, when they mix them, is that a physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is a physical change. You could separate those, it wouldn't be easy, but you could separate out the ingredients again. All right, remember, Mrs. Halpin's note said she saved the ashes from her dad's last cigarette. So when he burned the cigarette to make the ashes, was that a physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? Chemical change, good. When we baked the dough to get the raisin bread, it didn't look like this in 1983, but baking bread, is that a physical change or a chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is a chemical change. Developing film, is that a physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is a chemical change. Turning water blue with food coloring, physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is reversible. I can evaporate the water out and I'll be left with the dye. So is that a physical change or chemical change? Physical change. Decaying leaves, rotting leaves, physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. It is chemical change. The spring, squeezing the spring, physical change, chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. Good. I think you guys are really figuring this out. It's physical. Burnt toothpick, not the 2 live toothpicks that are still in there, good toothpicks, the burnt one at the bottom. Physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is chemical change. The mud that has dried into dirt, physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. Can I reverse it? Yeah, I can put water back in and make it mud again. It's physical change. The chewed up washcloth that fell in the garbage disposal, physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. It's not new material, it's still washcloth, it's physical change. Nora, everybody tasted this when you were in the other room. Can you come? No. This is an old rotted noodle. Remember, when you put the noodle in the boiling water, was that a physical change or chemical change? This one's tricky. Physical change? Chemical change? It's a physical change because it's reversible. You can dry it back out, get the water back out of the noodle, and it's a physical change. Okay? Burning a candle, physical change, chemical change. Physical change? Chemical change? Yeah, the hint is burning. Okay? When you burn something, you give part of the material is released as smoke, part of the material is released as water, part of the material is left as ashes, and so that is a chemical change. The Jell-O no longer looks like this, but when it was fresh Jell-O, when making the Jell-O, was that a physical change or a chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. Believe it or not. It's similar to mixing the food color with the water. You can evaporate the water back out. It's not easy. You can do it and separate those ingredients again. Question 17. Number 18, the old paper. And I just noticed, if you look carefully, you can see the paper that's not exposed to the light underneath, and it's not as dark yet. That fading of the paper, was that a physical change or a chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. Is it still paper? Physical change. Chopping up confetti to root on a terrible team, is that a physical change or a chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. It is a physical change. Hair from 1983. Cutting the hair, is that physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change. It's still hair, it's a physical change. Dora, were you here when we saw this? Okay, I didn't know when you came in. I was gonna try to get her to drink it. Physical change or chemical change? Milk from 1983. Physical change? Chemical change? Yeah, that's why I can't let anyone drink it, because who knows what it would do to you. It's not milk anymore. The frayed end of the ribbon, is that physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? It is physical. And finally, the nail, the iron nail, rusting to create the rust, which is iron oxide. Is that physical change or chemical change? Physical change? Chemical change? The hint is new products are formed, the iron oxide. We have a new bond there. That is chemical change. If it's not what? There's probably water, there's gas, there's who knows, a bunch of different stuff. Probably bacteria's in there. All right, shh. In a minute I'm gonna collect these, okay? Once I collect them, the rest of the time I expect you to be finishing work for me. And I wrote names of people on the board outside. You're not going out to look at it. If you didn't look at it, how else can you check to see if you owe me anything? Or Power School, okay? And then don't forget, some of you I think turned in stuff but didn't message me. Make sure you message me. If you turned it in yesterday and I didn't grade it, your name might be out there. Once I grade it, I'll erase your names, okay? Question. I'm not grading it. I'm not grading it. If you're done with all of your work for me, and you owe maybe your autobiographical map for Mrs. Railing, or your letter to self or something else for Mr. Sheets, you can work on those only if you're done with all your work for me. If you're caught up with everything, then you can read or do IXL. Those are your options, okay?